So while the world focuses on the US presidential election, the rise of Donald Trump, how could he possibly win the nomination, and all of that, in the Philippines, one guy is close to winning the election, and that's Rodrigo Duterte, the former mayor of Davao City. Now, I've known about Duterte for a while, reading the Time article on the Asian Punisher, as he is called. And the reason he's called the Asian Punisher is that he kills criminals. Not legally, he doesn't necessarily acknowledge it, but basically, he became mayor of the most crime-infested city in the country, the murder capital of the Philippines, and then turned that city around completely. It's now a relatively wealthy city, it has very low crime, it has an emergency system, there are anti-discrimination laws, and all of that is the work of Rodrigo Duterte and his administration. He was mayor for a very long time. And the way he accomplished this, obviously passing laws to improve conditions in the city, but in terms of dealing with crime, in terms of dealing with murder, and in terms of dealing with kidnappings, he basically formed assassination squads, or at least that's the story, that he formed assassination squads, death squads, vigilante squads to kill criminals. Because the Philippines is a deeply corrupt country. So he took a stance, and his way of solving the issue was, in his own words, to be the garbage man, take out the trash, effectively, with a bullet to the head. He said that he would, as president, solve corruption in 6 months after becoming president. He's also talked about federalizing the Philippines. Now, the Philippines has a lot of division in the country. There's a very different mentalities between north, center, and south. I have a buddy who is from the Philippines. And he tells me that Davao City is as good as people make it out to be. And that it was as big of a hellhole before Duterte became mayor. So Duterte, who's an inclusive guy, who's in a sense, you know, a left-wing guy, basically solved the problems of his city by murdering criminals. And this is a guy who, when he became mayor, with his bodyguards, at least that's the Time story that I read, the old one. The story goes that one of the first things he did when he became mayor was get involved in a shootout with some kidnappers that were collecting the ransom. He stopped them, killed some of them. He says he killed some of them, and you know, that's how he gained popularity, by risking his own life, walking on the streets of his city, fighting crime, and punishing criminals by executing them effectively. If you break the law, you're bound to be executed. And that's what he's promising to do. Take that from what he did in Davao City and take that and put it on a national level. He's also vowing to end corruption, to end the civil strife, the fighting in the country. There are rebels in the Philippines, and he's vowing to deal with that. He's also saying he would negotiate with China directly on all the maritime disputes that the Philippines has with China. And he is a populist candidate. On top of that, his supporters begged him to run. He wasn't really willing to do so initially, but they begged him to do so, and he took on that mantle. He's not a rich person. He actually lives pretty modestly considering all the money. Like, this is a guy who could have made bank, been very rich, and he had fought and risked his own life fighting crime, and he succeeded. Now, human rights organizations will slam him for over 1,000, 2,000, thousands of deaths anyway that could be linked to him. But it's nice to have the ideal of law or an order of rehabilitation, all that. But that's a nice ideal, but that's not reality. As someone who lives in a corrupt country, which is nowhere near comparable to how horrible the Philippines is with drug, with crime, with guerrillas. You know, I know how it is how frustrating it can be for the average person to live in a country, to see people walk away when they broke the law. Big politicians break the law constantly. There's endemic corruption on all levels of society, and here is a person in the Philippines That's basically saying, you break the law, we won't just throw you in prison for a year or two. No, we'll execute you. We'll put a bullet in your head. That's essentially what Duterte is saying. You break the law, we will fuck you up. And that's why he's called the Asian Punisher. And that may be what the Philippines needs. Now, people talk about how he's authoritarian, even though he's a very inclusive, he has been a very inclusive mayor, or how he would be a dictator or mass murderer. The reality is, the idea of democracy rings very hollow to a lot of people, and the ideal of having law and order rings very hollow as well to a lot of people when you see so many people, especially among the elite, get away with so much. And when you see rampant crime and corruption in your country, you get sick and tired and you want a solution. And that's what Rodrigo Duterte is promising. He says he will deal with it he will deal with corruption in the first 6 months of office, because he says if you can't deal with it in the first few months, you're wasting your time. You will not deal with it in 10 years. So that's his vow. Will he succeed? He has a good track record. He will. He's basically, people have called him the Asian Trump, the Philippine Trump. But although he has a big mouth like Trump does, this guy makes Trump look like a bitch in comparison. As much as I like Trump, as much as I support Trump, he is nothing compared to Rodrigo Duterte and the things he's done, the accomplishments he has as a mayor, as former mayor of Davao City, and what he's promising to do. You think Trump's insane for the things he's promising? Duterte will escalate up to 11. This is a guy who says he'll kill thousands, tens of thousands of people to solve crime and corruption in his country. And that's actually a big deal. It is a really big deal in the Philippines. And again, when you have the courts corrupted, when you have the politicians corrupted, when you have lawyers, prosecutors, when you have corruption on every level of the country, it's difficult to get law and order. And again, although it's nice to have the ideal of rehabilitation, it's nice to have the ideal of humane prison conditions, of humane law, that ideal falls flat on its face. And you need someone like that to clean the country up, and then you can deal, you can acknowledge and endorse and accept the ideals of what a country should be like. That's my perspective. And Duterte himself says, maybe one day I won't be necessary, but at this moment, I'm the only person who can solve this problem. And he is right on that. He is right. He would bring change. He would solve problems. He has a track record of solving problems. He just wants to take that on a country level. He's effectively worshipped in the south of the Philippines, in the center of the country where they have a drug issue, crime issues as well. They're also supportive. In the north, which is the more important part of the country, it's more of a mixed bag between how people see him, those that support him, those that dislike him. Obviously, that's where the capital is, that's where all the elite are, and all of the elite hate him as well. They don't like him. They don't want him to be in power. They're saying that democracy will collapse. Well, you know what? Democracy is threatened when people get in power through corruption, through corrupt deals, and then don't solve anything. They're the disease in a sense. Duterte is the cure, as it were. The Philippines will vote for their president, their presidential choice. Duterte is leading the polls at the moment. They will vote on May 9th, and they will elect their president. And guess Duterte, the Asian Punisher, will become the president of the Philippines. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. A lot of people will die, but criminals will die. Corrupt officials will die, or be put in jail, or both. You never know. It's gonna be an interesting time. You see it all over the world. You see populist leaders rising up because people are sick and tired of more of the same. They're not buying it anymore. They're done with it. And that's just how it is. Costin here on Serious Gaming, signing out.